Hello, and welcome back to another spooky episode of the podcast. This episode is going to be Michigan's most haunted places and the stories behind them. And for the bonus content this week, if you are on Patreon, we are actually going to be vlogging ourselves going to one of these haunted locations. So if you want to see that, make sure you join the Patreon bonus content. And we are actually starting with the place that we are going to be visiting, and that is the Whitney Mansion in Detroit.
Dun, dun, dun.
That was a great sound effect for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the story behind the hauntings here is that it was originally built in 1894 for David Whitney Jr. and his wife and children. And a lot of people say this was supposed to be their forever home. And some say that it still is because they are said to be still haunting the place. So back when the house was built, that fantasy never came to fruition because the family matriarch, his wife, passed away in 1882 before the construction even began. But 1 year later, Whitney married Flora, the sister of his wife. And
This is shady, not just spooky. This is a shady story.
Exactly. And she became the stepmother to the family's 4 children.
Aunt, stepmother.
They ended up moving into the Whitney Mansion and taking over that home. And so, particularly now, people say that Sarah, the original wife, haunts the bathroom, the women's bathroom, and weeps because she never got to live in the home that her sister took from her.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me. I would weep too. If I went out that way and I don't have a sister, but in theory, my sister took my man, absolutely not.
Right. This could be a shady story in itself, but now turned spooky because she literally haunts the home, it said, over this. And I guess not that long later, a little bit of karma hit Mr. Whitney because Whitney himself ended up dying of a heart attack in the mansion in 1900.
In the bathroom?
Just in
general.
In the home.
It could have been the bathroom. We'll go with the bathroom for dramatic effect.
But that was just 6 years after the home was completed. Also, there was a little bit of a sad story there because David Whitney's daughter, Grace, was in Europe at the time of the passing, and she never got to say goodbye. And so now it's said that Grace enjoyed having tea in the home's carriage house, which is located just next door. And a tea set was always set out waiting for her visits because David Whitney always wanted that. So now they have a tea party set up in the carriage house, and it's said that if anyone touches the tea set to this day, that things will go breaking inside of the mansion, and people think it's David Whitney because he's upset. Because that's for his daughter.
Oh, that's precious.
Yes.
I love a temper tantrum over frivolous things.
And he is said to be doing that to this day. And Whitney's second wife, Sarah, the sister, ended up passing away in 1917, and the mansion was eventually transferred to the Wayne County Medical Center and used as a TB, tuberculosis, ward for some time. And so now some have reported that when they visit the mansion, spirits from that era are having coughing fits throughout the mansion, and that's what they can hear, and they think that those are the spirits from that era of the home.
That sure is something.
Kind of
I mean,
scary.
like, why did it go to the medical center? Just that's what David Whitney wanted? That's what Sarah wanted?
I think some people donate their properties to different causes, and maybe that was one that they chose. So after that, family didn't have it any longer, and it was no longer the medical ward. In the 1980s, the Whitney was reimagined as a restaurant and sold to an entrepreneur. And so now the building is open to the public and has been ever since. But in 2007, it was again reimagined when someone else bought it. And now they've kind of turned it into a state-of-the-art kitchen with a ghost bar on the 3rd floor, which is where we will be visiting during our vlog on the Patreon.
Yay.
So the spirits of David Whitney Jr. and his family are supposedly said to be there to stay. And a few different ways that they show up. One is So their residence was actually the first residence in Detroit to have a functional elevator.
Love that.
And so some people say, and it's supposedly on security footage as well, that the elevator is said to move up and down on its own without any passengers.
Oh, it just decides when it wants to move.
And so people think that it's the family using the elevators.
Good to know that we can still use elevators in our ghost.
I don't see why you need to. Can't you just like float upstairs?
That you would think, but maybe that's not just the logistics of it. Like maybe the ghosts have to take the stairs.
That we'll never know.
I mean, until we're
ghosties. And then some say that they've seen unexplained apparitions in the second and third floors, and staff members have reported hearing sounds of utensils being stacked and table settings moving on their own. So we are going to go and we're going to see if we have any experiences. We're going to try to vlog. So if you want to see that, that will be on the Patreon. But let's get to the next haunted place in Michigan, which is the Holly Hotel.
The Holly Hotel. So the historic Holly Hotel has been long known to be haunted. It was deemed with loaded spirits in 1989, not to be confused with Taylor's hit album 1989 by Norman Garther. Garther is how we'll go with that. Is that how you say it? Gauthier? Yeah. A professor in parapsychology,
which I gathered. I don't totally know what this is.
Yeah, what is that?
I was a little into psych. I have never heard of parapsychology, but I believe it's paranormal activity.
Oh, let's fucking get it.
With psychology.
Love that for him. Norman, as we will refer to him now forward. The hotel gets yearly visits from ghost hunters from southern Michigan. The hotel has a long history, and part of that was 2 tragic fires that consumed the Holly Hotel. The first fire took place on January 19th, 1913, a very spooky year, 13. And that was followed by a second fire exactly 65 years apart to the day and to the hour. That doesn't seem like a coincidence.
That's
at all.
What I was thinking when I first looked into this history. That's what I was thinking. And I don't want to spoil things too much, but I will say that the Holly Hotel no longer is in business, and people say it was because of another fire.
That is spooky.
So
to
the building
say the least.
is definitely riddled with fire hazards.
We may need to drive by this one as well. So one of those fires is said to be the cause by the hotel ghost can't seem to pass on. The first of which is Mr. Hearst. He was the first formal hoteler when the hotel was called the Heist Hotel. His spirit seems to be unable to pass on into the afterlife due to the Great Fire at the Holly Hotel, as we mentioned in 1913, which ended his reign. His ghost is known to be the most frequent. If you see a man wearing a frock coat and a top hat, you most likely have met Mr. Heiss. The smell of cigars is a common manifestation of him. It can be soft, wafering, barely noticeable, or very overpowering and very strong.
Yeah, most guests do smell cigars when they walk in, and obviously you can't smoke inside the building, especially with all of their fire issues in the past.
Right.
But they do say that they notice a cigar smell, and whether they know about it or not, a lot of people will go there not really realizing that this is a haunted hotel.
Yeah.
And will complain of the smell of cigars, and the staff will always inform them, you're not allowed to smoke in the building. And if you're smelling that, that's most likely Mr. Hearst. And a lot of people also say that you can't see him. So although they have been known to see him in a frock coat and a top hat, those are mostly gathered based on like images of him from the past.
I see.
His apparition isn't really present. It's mostly manifested in the smell.
I see. Very strong smell. Well, I can see why he is the most common. Another ghost that seems to be trapped in the hotel is Nora Kane, called to be the hostess of the house from historical accounts. Miss Kane had a love of music and enjoyed playing a good medley now and again. Her spirit is frequently encountered as she materializes mostly in photographs, especially at weddings held at the hotel. Her portrait is displayed in the restaurant's main lobby. That's very much so giving Harry Potter vibes.
Yes, I will say I can imagine that this one is people kind of have come to this imagination of her based on the portraits being at the
I
hotel.
see.
And this one was interesting actually too because she's also known to be manifested mostly in the sense of smell of her perfume, which is a vastly different smell than the smell of
Cigars. Very
cigars.
two distinct
Yes,
smells.
so people actually will either smell this really nice floral sweet perfume
Oh, so
or the cigar smell. So very different smells that guests will complain about when they're there. And one is said to be her and one is said to be Mr. Hurst.
And guests have also spotted Nora's ghost most often in the bar and the back hallways, probably where you'd find my ghost, which once were the main entrance to the Holly Hotel. She's often described as graceful, not often
demure.
complete, very demure, but cutting off at about the knees. She is always wearing one of her beautiful dresses. Again, something that I would do in my ghostly form. Wear
Right,
beautiful
like,
dresses.
why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't we dress to the nines if we could? As I sit in my sweatpants, but I digress. Nora was also known to be a very good singer, and her soft medleys can sometimes be heard distantly in different rooms of the dining rooms late at night. She's also been known to ask people standing near the piano to play a tune for her, and a voice can also be heard throughout the house. That's wild.
I know. They have quite a few ghosts at this Holly Hotel because another one is a ghost in the kitchen that people say is the most active of the ghosts, which kind of makes sense because they think this is a younger spirit and it's thought to be potentially Nora's child who had passed away at a young age. And so now where the parking lot exists now, it used to be a stable. And some have speculated that maybe instead of it being Nora's daughter, it's a little girl who passed away in the stable next door from an injury. So they're not exactly sure who this is, but it's a very happy, playful ghost that is very active. And people think they're between the ages of 9 and 13. And they seem to toy with many kitchen items that are placed within the room. And a lot of times they will be moving a meat cleaver, which seems a little creepy.
I don't like that.
But it's said to be a happy ghost, so no worries there. They're not coming after anyone with the meat cleaver. And the young ghost has appeared, the only one that actually appeared during a seance in the early 1990s. So a soft giggling can be heard through this ghost in the kitchen and often is moving objects. The meat cleaver, teapots, utensils.
Don't like it. I don't like it one bit. And the hotel has now been closed since June of 2022 when a large fire in Holly damaged the historical building. The hotel owners have now since announced that they are selling it in a Facebook post on September 12th, 2024 for $899,000.
Yes. So this is recent news that the Holly Hotel is up for sale. I do believe that the original owners wanted to keep it, but they said that they made the difficult decision to ultimately sell it after the last fire. And so now it's up for grabs, which $899,000 doesn't seem that expensive to me for a hotel that's this popular.
Right. I really hope someone buys it so we can go see it potentially next Halloween. I'm on their website right now and it still looks like it's for sale now. Nobody's bought it just yet. So here's your chance, everyone.
It's up for grabs.
Buy this hotel. I mean, who wouldn't want to buy a haunted hotel? It looks so quaint.
Okay, next up on our haunted places in Michigan, we have the Terrace Inn and 1911 restaurant. So this is a hotel with a restaurant. So if you are a little too nervous to go stay at the hotel itself, you can just join the restaurant and take a look around. This one is in Petoskey, Michigan, and this place is so well known for having ghost encounters with guests that they actually keep a book at the front desk called The Ghost Files. And you can ask for it when you're there and read it. And they basically, it's like a guest book, and you can write your experience if you
With the
had any
ghost?
paranormal activity during your stay
Oh my
in this
goodness.
guest book. And so I did try to look online to see if there was any photos of it, but they don't let you take any photos. You're only allowed to see it if you're there in person.
Oh my gosh.
And so the hotel's website has a different story about the ghosts that are there versus other accounts. So
Okay.
according to the Terrace Inn's website, their haunted history is, according to a well-placed rumor, that the inn is haunted by spirits of 2 workers who passed away when a beam fell on them when they were doing construction
How
on the
awful.
hotel. And that to me makes a little bit of sense, you know.
Right.
And those ghosts have been seen, heard, and felt by guests and employees, according to the Terrace Inn website. But other paranormal investigations have said that there's 3 other main ghosts that roam the hotel. One being the lady in white. Some say this woman is named Elizabeth Abbey Sweet, who was searching for her husband. Another ghost that appears there, the man in tweed. So she's seen in hallways and guest rooms. And then that man, some say his name is Edward, her husband, and has been seen on the balcony looking into bedrooms. And then the third ghost that other people say haunts this Terrace Inn is the boy in the basement. And some say this boy is believed to be between 12 and 14 years old and seen in a shadowy form and interacts often with guests that go into the basement.
Oh, I don't like the basement. The basement spooks are too spooky for me.
Yeah, I don't even like going into my own basement, and I've had no said encounters. So I can't imagine how fast these people run up the stairs on their way out, but I would definitely be doing the same.
Oh, yes.
And this is according to guests that have stayed at the hotel and the hotel website itself. There's a room there, room 211, that if you stay in this room, you're bound to experience paranormal activity.
That's so scary. Do we stay in it? Do we go?
I don't know. So I have actually seen, and I'll insert a picture of actual reviews on like TripAdvisor talking about
Stop
guests not knowing that this room is particularly haunted and they get put into this room.
I feel like that's got to come with a warning.
Yeah, so this woman actually still left a 5-star review. However, she said, I love this inn, I love the area, and I will return. However, I will not stay in room 211. I stayed alone in the room and had a hair-raising experience with one of the paranormal inhabitants. I was told later that a lot of the paranormal activity takes place in this room and this wing of the building, mostly on the 2nd and 3rd floors. I have chills just typing about it. There are many people who enjoy this type of thrill. In fact, the inn hosts a ghost hunting weekend each October. However, this girl has booked room 100, a large jacuzzi suite with less reported activity, and is bringing her husband on another weekend in the fall. So guests do claim that this is true, and the website itself
And willing to
does.
go back.
Just not in that room. And other guests have reported mysterious whispers. This guest did not specifically say what their encounter was, but I believe them. And despite all of that, a 5-star rating, and the Terrace Inn has a 4.7 out of 5 stars with 587 reviews on Google to this day and is still open for booking.
I'm looking at the pictures of it right now and a little spooky. It's definitely dated in there. Definitely could create some spooky vibes.
Yeah, very much so.
Maybe we'll stick to the restaurant. Up next is we have the Traverse City State Hotel, which is also known as
the hospital.
Oh, yes.
Not the
It's
hotel.
also known as the hospital because that is what it is. It's in Northern Michigan Asylum and the Traverse City Regional Psychiatric Hospital, which is now decommissioned. So what we know about it is there's been screams, voices that travel throughout the hallways. The lights will flicker on and off throughout the building, and it's even more frightening that there has not been electricity in the space. So that's where it's like, why are these lights coming on and off?
And if you've ever watched, which I used to be so weird to think about, but we've probably said this before, I used to love watching those paranormal shows where they would try to get the ghosts to flicker on and off like light bulbs, and they
Right.
bring those things. And they do say that apparitions have a lot of energy, so they can
They can
bring
do something like that
electricity.
even if
So
it's not there.
it's interesting to think that that is going on there. I thought this was interesting because I feel like I've heard a lot of stuff where asylums will get stereotyped as this place that were like so negative and so haunted because so many terrible things happen there.
Right.
And this is actually one of the opposite cases. So people think that apparitions haunt this place not because they had a terrible experience and
But
are
because they were
trapped,
happy there.
but because it was actually one of the most happy and freeing times of their lives. So they choose to go back and stay at this
Interesting.
place.
It's interesting. They housed over 50,000 patients, hired 20,000 employees, and there was well over 250,000 visitors that came in and out before its closure. And now there's been apparitions of adults, children, even a priest who was believed to have, taken his own life there,
Yes.
which is really unfortunate. But the rumors are that there is also a distinguished creature that appears in the tunnels in the basement. So that's not one place that I would want to be, is the basement.
I agree. And I have actually seen very scary movies that kind of show these horrible things at these like they call them insane asylums, and they'll show like creepy stuff going on in the tunnels below. And so I envision that maybe that's where people get this idea of like creepy stuff going on in the
Right.
tunnels. But in this instance, the tunnels were actually made to help ventilation, airflow, and one of the big practices of this hospital was they believed that basically to heal patients with not barbaric treatments, but with nature and beauty and tranquility. And that's how they would help these patients that came through, which was a very large number. But on the contrary, and kind of going back to what you said about the priest, there is said to be this hippie tree outside of the hospital. It's one of the most popular legends, and it claims that it's a portal to hell. And
What? The tree?
yes, and people actually who go and visit and not necessarily believe that the hauntings are real or anything like that, because again, like I said, a lot of people know this hospital and asylum to have been an actual positive experience. So a lot of people will go in skeptical, thinking that maybe there's not a lot of activity, but they all agree, they all seem to agree that this tree in particular, when they start approaching it, they'll start hearing things rustling in the
Nope.
trees, rustling in the woods, and they don't end up approaching. And these are people who are skeptical. So this is one of the most popular legends actually of the building.
This is wild. You know what's wild is, this is on a different note, but a very similar note. When I was younger, my brother played hockey, so we went on a lot of hockey tournaments to not Chicago, but the suburbs of Chicago. And one time we stayed at a hotel that was once a hospital. It was a hospital turned into a hotel, and it was known to have a haunted floor. So they had two wings of the hotel, and it might have even been the 13th floor. And you would go up to it, and they didn't rent out rooms there. And it was all like, they didn't change anything in it. It was just abandoned looking. And I was trying to Google what this was called. I'll have to ask my parents what it was, because I went to that floor and didn't walk around the first time we took the elevator up to it. I was like, heck no, I'm not walking around here. And then I think I was convinced to go back with like my brother and his friends, and we all like walked around the floor, and it was so spooky.
It's actually really well known that a lot of hotels won't even have a 13th floor for a lot of
Right.
superstitious reasons like that. So I do believe, I mean, if there was one, it was definitely probably something going on. So apparently the superstition that many hotels skip the 13th floor is due to the fear of the number 13.
People don't want to stay on it, which is like also odd, because it's like, well, do people not stay on the 14th floor then? Because technically it is the 13th floor.
Well, that was interesting because that was something I always wondered. If you're like on the 14th floor, is it really the 13th floor and they renumbered it, or do hotels actually leave it empty?
Oh, it could be. It could be. But that, like, it's literally, I need to know the name of this hotel that we went to, because I have to find the pictures of it, because it was so, you would love it. It was so spooky.
I don't know if I would love it. I actually had an experience, and I don't know, maybe I did talk about this. I think I did talk about this on the podcast for a spooky story in the past, but in Ann Arbor, me and Evan had stayed at a hotel. It was unplanned, and it was like for Valentine's Day. We went to Ann Arbor, and we had a couple drinks at dinner. So we are like, let's stay down here. And so we stayed at a random hotel, kind of unplanned. And in the middle of the night, someone was banging on the door. And when we called the front desk at the hotel, they were like, there's no one there. We're looking at the cameras now. And basically this scary experience happened at a random hotel. And every time like something like that happens, I feel like, again, hotels are kind of just known sometimes to be these spooky places. And for whatever reason, the number 13 plays into this. And apparently it's rooted in like religion, mythology, numerology. And it's interesting. I've just looked it up for some facts. Home insurance building in Chicago was the first skyscraper, was only 10 stories high, and didn't have a 13th floor due to insurance. Sometimes for guest comfort, they want them to avoid feeling uncomfortable with the number 13, so they just don't put it. Many associate negative events with the 13th floor, so it can affect hotel staff and them not wanting to go onto the 13th floor.
I mean, I don't know if I would.
And actually, the 13th floor can deter buyers and lower property values. So it's interesting that this whole like superstition kind of comes. I mean, obviously we have Friday the 13th, and the 13th bat falls from the decor.
That scared me so bad.
It
moved.
I also hear some noise right now. So I don't know. We need to stop talking about this. There's
I feel like we're
inviting
on. Bad vibes into the set.
Very not good. So yeah, but this building, back to this
back to the hospital.
The Traverse City State Hospital. It is actually open today. So the main building, Building 50, and the outer buildings are being refurbished, and it's part of like a Grand Traverse Commerce Village where they have residential, commercial, like restaurants,
all the
things going on there. So they're trying to preserve this historical site, which I think is a good thing. I mean, it was a positive experience for a lot of people, and they're just refurbishing it. But while they're doing this, construction workers have said that they've seen figures on the grounds, and some of them have refused to turn to work. So you can actually do tours of the hospital, and they'll tell you the history. Some of them have like paranormal tours, but it's very much open to this day, just in a new way.
I meant to say that with the Whitney too. They do paranormal tours and ghost dinners and things like that. They sell out very quickly though. We've been trying to keep our eyes on it to get to one.
Originally, that's what we were going to do for the Patreon vlog. However, they're all sold out. So we are just going to go and see what we can capture there.
We're going to do our own little paranormal investigation journalism, if you will. We're ready.
Well, that concludes this week's episode. The most haunted places in Michigan. Well, some of them at least. There's plenty. But that is it, and the stories behind them. So we will see you guys in the next spooky episode.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.